Hi, good evening. My name is Amy Kendall. I'm the Administrator of Community Family-Based Services at Maryville Academy. And I'm just really delighted this evening to have our guest here, Janique McGowan, who is a program director at Salvation Army here in Chicago. And it's really special for me to have Janique here because Janique and I worked alongside each other several years ago when she was working at the Maryville Crisis Nursery, and we also have another part of our lives in common is that we both attended the Erickson Institute to receive our Master's in Child Development, and I think that's what really tugged at my heart to keep bringing her back for us to hear today, because Janique really brings a very special way of working with families and children that is really critical to what our previous conversations have been about in terms of keeping families thriving and moving and meeting their goals and the things that they want to achieve in life. So, Janique, why don't you tell us a little bit about your pathway here today?
Okay, awesome. So I'm really happy to be here. Nice to connect with you again. So I attended Erickson. That was like my headway into early childhood. My first job was at Bright Horizons, downtown Chicago, and I was an infant teacher. From there, I went into I was still kind of dabbling into my first love of biology, which was my undergrad degree. And then I moved into Maryville at the Crisis Nursery, which was a super awesome experience. And then to my current role as the site director for Salvation Army's Early Head Start program. So that is a home-based program that we provide wraparound services for families, for pregnant moms and families that have children under 3 years old. And so the purpose of Head Start is to help children become school ready. So even at the young ages of birth to 3, we're providing them with the steps, and the parents, of course, because they are the children's first teachers. So we provide them with the tools and the child development knowledge to provide supports for their children, so that by the time they reach preschool and then formal school age of kindergarten, they're more prepared and better prepared, because primarily we work with low-income families and those that may be more in the underserved communities. So we make sure that we are connecting them with resources, so if they want to go back to school, if they're homeless, if they are looking for a job, so we connect them with those resources that they need to help them become self-sufficient, which ultimately helps the children as well.
Right. We've known for all these years that the well-being of parents really is directly connected to the well-being of the children.
Yes.
I know Salvation Army here in Chicago is well known and has many different sites. Maybe you can share a little bit about the different sites that have early childhood programming.
Sure. So our child care department is small but mighty. So we have my program, which is our home-based program. So I actually go in the homes on a weekly basis and provide services for the families. Then we have our other sites, our center-based programs. So we have Early Head Start, so that's birth to, 6 weeks to 3 years old. We have one at Simpson High School, so it's connected to Simpson. It's our Early Head Start program, center-based. And then, so it's the Simpson Early Head Start program, and that is Ashland, Paulina. And then
Actually,
we have...
Excuse me, that's just across the street from us.
Yes, it's like walking steps from here, so yes. And then we have Temple Head Start, which is a 3 to 5 program, center-based program, which is 1 North Ogden. It's actually located within one of our Salvation Army Corps sites, so that program is for 3 to 5, it's preschool age. And then we have New Hope Head Start, which is in our Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago, which is a 3 to 5 program, and we also have a toddler room. So we're able to service 2-year-olds in one classroom, and then 3 to 5s in the other classroom. And that program is primarily Spanish-speaking population that we service. However, we invite all families. All families are welcome, and we always invite children and families that have disabilities as well are always welcome to our sites. I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting any of our sites.
Well, that's quite a few. In fact, you know, in terms of early Head Start, just to get a little bit more specific, I'm curious when you talked about parents having being pregnant. I was just wondering, when can they start to get connected with early Head Start? Is there a certain time within their pregnancy?
So for my program, I am the only home-based programs work directly with pregnant moms. So I've had a lot of referrals from Simpson, from our early Head Start program at Simpson. They've referred the pregnant moms to us because they're not able to service them until the children are 6 weeks old.
Okay.
So a lot of times I've helped them throughout their pregnancy, and then through the child's first 6 weeks, and then the children transfer to our early Head Start program.
Wow.
Yep. Our center-based program.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, that's such a precious, vulnerable time for a mom during her pregnancy, and then, to go through the birth of a baby. Do you have any insights after all these 10 years of what has been most impactful for families? Is there any part of the work that you do or part of the process that you think has really had a big impact on families at that time?
I think the most important part of this work in general is just being vulnerable with the families and to really meet them where they are. And get a sense of what their values are and try to support those values and goals that they have, because a lot of times families and parents in general have goals that they want to meet their children to meet, and they have goals for themselves that they want to meet. And so really talking to them and being, getting down to earth with them and having honest, transparent conversations with them, I think is key to, and that's helping to build a rapport with the families. So that is super important, is really being honest and transparent about what it is that we do and why we're, how we are able to service them and help support them in being their child's first teacher.
Yeah.
So walking alongside them and not necessarily saying you didn't do it right, or, helping them to navigate, any mental health services they might need, any parenting services that they can help them in being a better parent and a better person in general. And as I said before, to help them become more independent and self-sufficient, which will help their children in the long run.
Well, and the way you describe that, it seems sort of common sense, but we know that relationships matter.
They do.
And what I hear you saying is that once you've developed a relationship, that's sort of the pathway to be able to support them to some of the things that they want to do. And,
yes.
In this work or at a time in our life during a pregnancy for a parent, and it's not just the parent, it's other extended family members, right?
Yep.
And how is that all perceived, and how is that going to be supported? And, I hear you saying that what you just described as being respectful.
Yes.
And just really the fact that, each of us comes to this time in our life and it's fragile. And so it kind of reignites all kinds of hopes and dreams and values and your own childhood.
Yes.
And, my impression is that you're sort of, as you're walking alongside, you're listening to all of that.
Yes.
And helping them kind of work through that, because once this little baby comes, it's about the day-to-day and the caretaking, but now we have to start thinking about, well, what do we value as a family? How do we want them to be treating other people? And more importantly, when they're a baby, how do we want other people to treat them?
Yes.
What does it mean to, when I say, we should be holding babies, or, grandma said just let them sleep through the night, or all the familial beliefs and the way our families, helped us grow up.
Yes.
That may or may not be something that resonates with you. And
Right.
so being able to have your own voice with all of those pieces, and then as they get older, navigating that voice in the school system.
Yes, definitely.
And I don't know if you can speak to that in any way, particularly, for children who might need some additional support in terms of their development.
Yes.
I'm sure that, you can speak a little bit about referrals to early intervention, or how is that process?
Yeah, definitely. So part of our the service that I provide and all of our sites provide for our families is making sure that we're doing regular developmental screenings for the children. So it's dependent on their age. So maybe ages and stages, or it could be the EZR, EZP. So it just depends on the age of the children. Just a service that because that's one of the components that we have to meet as a federally funded program, and to making sure that the children are able to be school ready at the age that they start formal schooling. And so early intervention is one of the services that we provide based on the results of an ASQ screening. And so that's another time that we're able to, and that's a great way to have already established a relationship with the family, so that those difficult conversations, because they can be difficult and hard to hear, because depending on what's going on with the child, if they're autistic or if they have a learning disability, that can almost be like a death to the parent, because the goals that they have for that child, they may be different now, because, or they may not be, because if they get the services that they need through early intervention or special education with public school, then that can get them to where they need to be developmentally and behaviorally, because a lot of times behavior is really piggybacking off of development. So it's a reason why they're behaving that way, is because developmentally they're not, and they know it as children, but they can't really vocalize it because they're so young. So they're like, well, this is how I'm gonna get this out. I'm gonna behave in this manner. And so it's just a way to help the families as a whole. Another wraparound service that we provide to make sure that the children are okay as well as the families, because and maybe the first time they may not be okay with referring that child, but that we're not giving up. We're going to continue to be there as a support for the families, because culturally there's a lot of differences across cultures in terms of disabilities or other parts of child development that they're not the same. And so we have to meet families where they are culturally as well, linguistically, in all the different ways, because every family is different. Even within the same ethnicity or race, they're still different, because every family has had different experiences. They have different values and goals and beliefs. So just making sure that we are treating each family and child individually, so that they feel valued and supported.
Well, and I think, I certainly saw you in action at the nursery, and everything you described, I would see you do with the kids primarily, but also with the parents. And I think, as a parent myself of 3 kids, now that they're older, just really thinking about who was around them when they were young, and how that was, how that impacted them, and what influences that they've had. And then I think about the people in my life who have had at different points, whether I was in grammar school or high school, or, we know that these first, 3 years of life are really, really integral to the foundation. And, if we can build upon that and with positive, engaging relationships, you're in the thick of working towards a PhD, you mentioned, and, I think one key aspect that you mentioned that you were going to be studying is family engagement, and that when we look at the growth of a child or a human, how each of those different systems have an impact, but most importantly, the family. And although we know sometimes that may not necessarily be the ideal situation, how are the other systems there to support, and a family really be able to see that there's other trusting people out there, whether it's through their church or through, the community center or their Salvation Army or,
Right.
all different places that you may or may not be familiar with, but it sort of forces you to consider trusting.
Yes.
And if, you're hoping people are having a good experience with that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you want to add something more about that whole family engagement. Like, it sounds like we know that's so important, but
Right.
Tell us more about that.
I mean, if you think about like a child's their formative years from birth to 3 and even till up to 5 years old, it's about relationships. And children learn, that's how they first learn the world, is through their relationship with their primary caregivers, so their mom, dad, whatever the family dynamic is, and then their siblings, and then their external, family, and then within their community, and then their school environment. So those are the different environments that are all interconnected and helping to support the child and show the child, the family, of course, shows them what their values are and what's important to that family and how they treat people, how they engage with the world. And so from what they learn in-house, they take that out into the world with them. And so that's how they, so hopefully there are protective factors within the family that help support whatever risk factors that they might come against. So maybe that builds their resilience. And so if they live in an underserved community, if they have a loving family to come back to, then that helps them be more resilient and, overcome the obstacles that they might encounter. All of us have encountered obstacles, no matter what our family dynamic or community, the neighborhoods we come from, they're going to be life. That's just life. And so in working with families in underserved communities, the goal is really to just help them to understand, as the parents understand, that their relationship, how important that relationship is to their child. Having a strong relationship, a healthy, stable relationship with their child is going to prepare their children to really conquer the world, so that when they come up against things that are not the most pleasant, they know how to work through it, because you can't just kind of float through life. I mean, you can, but it's, you're not going to be as successful, but realizing that there's going to be times where you're not dealt the best hand, but how can you work through it? How can you get through it? And having those people, their village behind you to help you get through it.
Yeah, I think that you make such important points, and I think the idea of, creating those connections with those that can be helpful. And it can be kind of scary to consider sharing maybe personal information, or would that be used in the wrong way, or you and I, we're in the social media world, and that is its own challenge. It's a gift and a challenge, and families need to navigate that whole thing. I mean, I'm realizing and watching families with young children just deciding, is the phone going to be something a baby or a child, is that okay for them to have?
Yeah.
And it gets, I didn't have that as a parent, but that's really tricky.
It is.
Because, when I'm there with my niece who's 18 months old and she can just, swipe the family photos, it seems so cute.
Right.
But on the other hand, how does that get to the next step, and how parents really have to negotiate all these decisions, and it's really tough.
It is.
And I think what's so valuable about your time with them is that you're able to sort of stop and do some reflection, and all parents, for the most part, are feeling, I don't have time, I have this and this and this to do. But we know that taking those valuable moments to stop and think, and then you can make decisions that will actually make it easier in the long run, although it may be painful in the process. That's hard because, particularly when children are little, they're just in constant need of our attention.
Yes.
And particularly for parents who maybe don't get a break.
Right.
And their support system is weak. how to kind of build that up in a way that's going to be nurturing. I mean, we
Yes.
all need that, doesn't, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
I had an experience this weekend where we got together as a family for a meal, and it's been a while, and we just laughed and really enjoyed it. And they say one of the important factors of feeling connected as a family is around a meal.
Yep.
And a meal can look a lot of different ways.
Yes.
And being at church, we have soup and bread. I mean, I that's one of my favorite things. I always carry a can of soup with me because you just never know when it's time to eat. And it sounds like your early Head Start and Head Start really has those foundational concepts.
Yes.
That you're sort of trying to bridge that, because particularly as a new mom, you may know or you may not know.
Right.
Or, if this is your second child, it could be a completely different experience. Yes. And so, sort of modeling that ability to question or be curious. Do you find parents wanting to be curious? Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, like you said, just because they might have already had children before, this one might be colicky. This one might just be, they're not all the same. Even though they're from the same family, they have different personalities. Their temperament is different. So, and that can impact how even the mom and the child engage with each other. Because if my temperament is opposite of my child's, then how am I going to engage with them? Like, that's going to be compared to maybe my child that we have a similar temperament, is going to those relationships are going to look so different. And so I think just one thing that we want to provide for families, for all of our sites, is setting goals with the families at the beginning of when they become enrolled. And so the goals can be something for the family to accomplish, short-term, SMART goals. And so they can be something that the family wants to accomplish, or the parent, or something for the child. So for a pregnant mom, it can just be delivering a healthy baby.
Yes.
And what it takes to get to that.
Yes.
So going to their prenatal appointments, first going back and saying, do you have a prenatal doctor? Do you have a doctor that you see, a obstetrician that you see and do you have a plan for a birth plan? Are you going to give birth at home? Are you going to a hospital? You want to do water birth? There's so many different types of births, birthing plans. And so who do you want in the room? If dad is in the picture, if he's not, if it's a different family dynamic, all of those things I try to kind of map out for them. There's a curriculum that we follow depending on where the mom is, what trimester they're in. And so we're, helping them to get to the point where they're delivering a healthy child. So we have a nurse that comes to meet with them before they give birth, then after they give birth, within the first 2 weeks of the child's birth, to just make sure that everything's okay, talk to them about family planning, because a lot of times that's when we get those stair steps of kids, like the baby, you just had a baby and then you don't, wait the 6 weeks necessarily, and then here you are, another baby. So just kind of talking to them about the choices that they have and making the best choices for them and for their family. So in terms of setting goals, something that they can accomplish within 3 to 6 months, so that, maybe they have a goal ultimately of finishing school, but breaking it down into a smaller chunk. Yeah. So maybe identifying a school first, finishing the first semester, so that they can cross off those small successes, so they're not feeling like, so defeated. Yeah. They're feeling accomplished because they've gotten these smaller goals done. And then just making sure that you're providing like all of the different components for that family to make sure that they're successful, and kind of talking through with them about being proactive instead of reacting all the time.
Is there a highlighted family that comes to mind for you? We got about 2 more minutes here.
Okay.
Actually, we're any special children or families that you can tell us about in the last minute here?
I actually just one of my longest term families just I had to take them out of the family because the child aged out.
Oh.
But I had been with the family since their oldest child, who just turned 8 today.
Oh.
She was pregnant with that child, so that was my longest family that I've had.
Wow.
So like 8 or 9 years, because I had her when she was pregnant with her now 8-year-old,
Wow.
and so 3 children after that. You know, I'm still kind of sad, and it's been like a year since they've been
yes.
gone, and I still am connected with them. So
wonderful.
that's what, one of the pluses of this job and this work is that making true connections with families and really making a difference in their lives.
No, that's absolutely beautiful. And to kind of wrap up, what I was hoping you could do is share the phone number for Salvation Army, so that if anybody has any questions or
Sure.
need any support, whether it's in the early childhood area or, we know Salvation Army has a breadth of different services for families. What would that phone number be? If you could
So
share.
for our child care department, 773-382-4707 is our program director, and then 773-382-4710 is our office manager, and they can provide you anyone that calls with the other sites contact information. So depending on where you are in the Chicagoland area, we can get you connected with a center-based program or with a home-based program, if that's a better fit for you.
Wow, well, that's wonderful.
Yep.
I just really am delighted to see just your great work.
Oh,
and,
thanks.
I think we need to keep having good adults around each other, right?
Yes.
And just helping our communities grow and thrive. And I just, really want to thank you for being here today, and know that you're always welcome to come back.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And just keep up the good work for our families and our children, because you provide such wonderful expertise that really needs to be shared.
Yes. Thank you.
So thank you.